Dr. Zaria Cross had seen death before. She had stitched wounds under enemy fire, dragged dying soldiers through smoke and blood, and kept a steady hand while chaos raged around her. But nothing. Not war, not gunfire, not even the screams of the dying, felt as dangerous as the 5 shadows stepping onto the sidewalk in front of her. Her body tensed. She was just 2 blocks from home. The streets were empty, but the men before her stood still, waiting, watching. Their faces were hidden beneath dark hoods, their hands stuffed into jacket pockets, but she could see the way their shoulders squared, the way their bodies leaned forward, just slightly. Predators, testing the air before the attack. Zaria stopped walking. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments below. Be sure to click the notification button so you don't miss any updates, like the video to show your support, and share your thoughts in the comments. One of them stepped closer. The streetlight barely touched his face, but she caught a glimpse of sharp cheekbones, a jagged scar along his chin. He tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he was about to solve. "You're the doctor from County General, right?" His voice was low, almost casual. Zaria didn't answer. Silence was safer. The man took another step. This time, his voice turned sharp, accusing. "You treated my boy in the ER. Now he's dead." A sudden chill swept through Zaria's body. She kept her breathing slow, steady. "I treat everyone who comes through my doors." His lips curled into a humorless smile. "Yeah, you tell the cops about him." Her stomach twisted. They thought she was a snitch. "I don't talk to police," she said firmly. "I save lives. That's my job." The others shifted. One of them muttered something under his breath. Another cracked his knuckles. The tension in the air thickened. The leader chuckled, but there was no amusement in his eyes. "Yeah. Well, tonight, we take yours." And then, they rushed her. Zaria moved before she could think. She stepped back, twisting her body just as the first man lunged. His fist swung past her face, missing by inches. The moment his momentum carried him forward, she grabbed his wrist, twisted, hard. Crack. He screamed, stumbling backward, clutching his arm. 1 down, 4 to go. Another charge. Zaria ducked low, using her combat training. He tried to grab her, but she spun behind him, slamming her elbow into the base of his skull. He dropped. 2 more came at her at once. One swung wildly. The other pulled something from his pocket, a blade. Zaria barely dodged the first punch before the knife slashed toward her stomach. Her heart slammed in her chest. Too close. She grabbed the knife wielder's wrist and drove her knee into his gut. He gasped for air. She twisted the blade from his fingers and flicked it in her hand. Now she had the weapon. The gang hesitated. Their confidence cracked. They weren't expecting a fight. They had thought she was just a doctor. They had no idea who they were messing with. Then, a gun cocked. Zaria froze. The leader, Trey, had stepped back, raising a pistol. His hand was steady. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. The street was deathly silent. The only sound was the harsh breathing of the injured men around her. Trey tilted his head. "Damn, Doc," he muttered. "Didn't think you had it in you." Zaria's mind raced. This was bad. A knife was one thing. She could fight, dodge, disarm. A gun was different. One wrong move, and she wouldn't make it home. Slowly, she lowered the knife. Her breath was calm, but her pulse pounded like war drums in her ears. "Pull that trigger, and your boy dies," she said, nodding toward the man on the ground. Trey's eyes narrowed. "What?" "Your guy." She gestured toward the one gasping for air, his ribs rising and falling in sharp, painful jerks. "His lung is collapsing. He won't make it unless I help." Trey hesitated. She saw it, the flicker of uncertainty. The unspoken rule in the streets, loyalty. Killing her meant letting his guy die. A muscle twitched in his jaw. His grip on the gun tightened, then loosened. "Fix him," he muttered. "But if he dies, you die too." Zaria exhaled. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The first attacker swung fast, aiming straight for her face. Zaria moved faster. She ducked low, her combat instincts kicking in. Too slow, too predictable. She had faced worse in war zones. Men twice this size, armed to the teeth, desperate to kill. Her hand shot up, grabbing his wrist before the blade could reach her. With one swift motion, she twisted. Hard. Crack. A scream tore through the night as the attacker's wrist snapped. The knife clattered to the ground. He stumbled back, clutching his arm, eyes wide with shock. He wasn't expecting this. None of them were. The second man lunged, but Zaria was already moving. She sidestepped, using his own momentum against him. With a sharp push to his back, he lost balance and slammed into a lamppost. The impact sent a sickening thud through the air as he crumpled to the pavement. 2 down, 3 left. The others hesitated now. They had thought she was just a doctor. They were wrong. One of them pulled something from his pocket, a blade glinting under the streetlights. He snarled, stepping forward. Zaria raised her fists, steady, ready. Then, a gun cocked. The sound was unmistakable. She froze. Her eyes flicked to the leader. Trey. He stood a few feet away, his face calm, unreadable. But his grip on the gun was firm, the barrel aimed right at her chest. Enough, he said. The night fell silent. Zaria held her breath, staring at the gun. Think. 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 She had disarmed men before, but this was different. One wrong move, and she wouldn't live to make another. She kept her voice even. If you pull that trigger, your boy dies. Trey's expression darkened. What? Zaria nodded toward the unconscious man on the ground. The one groaning in pain, his breaths coming short and ragged. He's not breathing right. Cracked ribs. Probably internal bleeding. If you don't let me help, he won't make it. Trey hesitated. The others exchanged glances. Zaria had been in enough high-risk situations to know fear when she saw it. They weren't just thugs looking for a fight. They had rules, loyalties, priorities. They could replace money, weapons, even territory. But a life, that was different. She took a slow step forward, keeping her hands up. Decide. Kill me, or let me save him. Trey's jaw clenched. His finger twitched on the trigger. Then, with a growl, he lowered the gun. Fix him, he muttered. But if he dies, you're dead too. Zaria knelt beside the injured man, her heart pounding. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Zaria knelt beside the injured man, her hand steady even though her mind was racing. He was in bad shape, wheezing, his chest rising unevenly. Each breath sounded worse than the last. A collapsed lung. She had seen this before. If she didn't act fast, he wouldn't make it. But she had no supplies, no gloves, no tools. She needed a medical kit. She looked up. The gang members stood around her in a tight circle, their eyes locked on her, watching, waiting. She wasn't one of them. She wasn't supposed to be here. Get me a first aid kit, she said, her voice firm. For a moment, no one moved. Then Trey, their leader, gave a sharp nod. One of the men disappeared into the shadows and returned seconds later, tossing a bag at her feet. Zaria caught it, ripped it open, and pulled out what she needed. She worked fast, blocking out everything else. She had one job: keep him alive. She took a deep breath, then carefully inserted a tube into the man's chest. A trickle of blood spilled over her fingers. He coughed, gasped, then his breathing steadied. It worked. A few of the gang members muttered under their breath. They had expected her to fail. She didn't. But the moment wasn't over. Trey crouched beside her, his voice low. You tell the cops about us. Zaria's hand stilled. She turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze, unflinching. "No," she said. Trey's jaw tightened. "You doctors snitch. You tell them about gunshot wounds." Zaria exhaled. She had been accused of worse. "I treat whoever comes in, even your enemies," she said. His face darkened. "That's a problem," Trey muttered. A door burst open. Another gang member stormed in, panic in his eyes. "Rival crew just hit us. Our guys are down." Trey's head snapped up. "Where?" "South End. It's bad." Trey clenched his jaw. His fists curled at his sides. His gang was under attack. Then, slowly, he turned to Zaria. "Guess you got more work to do, Doc." She wasn't going anywhere. The cold metal door slammed shut behind Zaria. She was inside a dark, abandoned warehouse. No windows, no exits. The air smelled of rust, sweat, and something worse, blood. Men lay across the floor, some groaning in pain, others barely moving. Pools of red spread beneath them. Gunshot wounds, stab wounds. Too many injuries, not enough time. She was trapped. Trey stood before her, arms crossed, his dark eyes unreadable. "Save them," he said, "or die." Zaria's throat tightened, but she didn't hesitate. She had no choice. Dropping to her knees, she opened the medical bag they had given her and got to work. No gloves, no proper equipment, just her skills, her instincts, and whatever she could salvage from the supplies they shoved at her. She pressed hard against a bleeding wound, feeling the warmth of blood soak through her fingers. The injured man gasped, eyes rolling back. "Stay with me," she muttered. Another man coughed, his breathing ragged. A gunshot to the shoulder. She had to stop the bleeding before it was too late. All the while, the gang members whispered. They didn't trust her. She could feel their eyes burning into her, watching her every move. If someone died, they'd blame her. She was an outsider, a doctor in a den of killers. Zaria worked fast. She had saved soldiers on battlefields, under sniper fire, in helicopters shaking from explosions. But this was different. One wrong move, and she wouldn't make it out alive. Then, the front door burst open. A rival gang stormed in, guns raised. Chaos exploded. Gunfire. Tree dove for cover. The gang scattered, returning fire. Zaria hit the ground as bullets tore through the air above her. Sparks flew as metal ricocheted off old machinery. Screams, shouts. The smell of gunpowder filled the room. She had to move. Now, crawling low, she reached for the injured man closest to her. He was still alive. Barely. If she could just. Then she saw him. The gang member she had saved earlier. The one whose lung she had fixed. He was clutching his side, breathing hard, his eyes flickering between her and the rival gang. A choice flickered in his eyes. Zaria's heart pounded. Would he protect her, or let her die? His fingers tightened around a gun. He turned, aimed, fired. Not at her. At the rival crew. He had chosen to protect her. The gunfight raged on, but the police were coming. Sirens blared in the distance. Flashing red and blue lights pierced through the cracks in the warehouse walls. The gangs scattered. Some ran, some dragged their injured out the back. Trey turned, locking eyes with Zaria. Something had changed. "You saved my brother," he muttered. "I don't forget debts." Then he was gone. Zaria stood alone, her hands still stained with blood. Alive, change, and knowing. This wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. Let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments below. Be sure to click the notification button so you don't miss any updates. Like the video to show your support, and share your thoughts in the comments.